Unbelievably excited for this test that Duke basketball has coming up on Saturday. It's not often you get a February non-conference game like this. From Madison Square Garden, Duke set to take on Illinois.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So excited to have you here with us today on Thursday, February 20th, 2025. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on inside the life of Duke athletics. And today we focus a whole lot about what's taking place with Duke men's basketball ahead of an epic non-conference game when they will take on Illinois this Saturday from Madison Square Garden. And who better to have that conversation with than our good buddy Leif Thulin. He's got the Big Board Show with Locked On. He's got game nights with Locked On College Basketball. He's filled in on this program from time to time. I'd put his basketball mind up there with just about anybody. So really excited to break this game down with him, talk about the rise of Cooper Flagg throughout the course of the season, and what does it look like for Duke now that they're set to miss Malik Brown for some time. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Go ahead and also watch us each and every day on YouTube. Mentioned it yesterday, but so excited to announce we have surpassed 3,000 subscribers on YouTube. Thanks to you guys for building this Locked On Blue Devils community. Let's keep that number going up. We got 3,000, never satisfied, on the pursuit for 4,000 subscribers as an exciting March Madness run is ahead for this Duke basketball team. Follow us on X at LO_Blue Devils, and I'm there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. So without further ado, we bring him on into the program. The aforementioned Leif Thulin is back with us once again, and I've had a lot of time talking about this game so far this week, Leif, and it's a game that Jon Scheyer and Brad Underwood were able to book quite some time in the offseason, and you get the announcement that it's going to be played on February 22nd. At first, you're reading it, and you're like, that's got to be a typo. November 22nd, maybe during Feast Week or something like this. But here we are, both teams in the heart of conference play, and they're going to step aside, and we get to see a really fun non-conference game coming up this weekend.
Yeah, and I read that, and I thought, wow, that's great, because I want more games that mean something later in the season between programs that don't typically play one another.
Yeah.
And then you look at Illinois. Right now, they've had peaks and valleys of their season. Right now, they're struggling. They've kind of had a lack of continuity, switching lineups. And Duke, I would say, has coasted for much of ACC play because, frankly, there aren't many teams that can compete with their athleticism and defense. And you look at what they do, I think Illinois is going to be a more stingy test than most ACC teams, despite not having the familiarity, despite the scouts being less informed. But I think it'll be a stylistic difference. Duke should certainly be the favorite. Illinois has not been particularly great. They've dealt with some injuries and switching lineups, like I've said. But there's actual NBA talent on the other side. And I don't know how many times you can say that about Duke's competitors since the calendar turned.
Yeah, I feel like that's fair to say. When you look at the type of players that some of these other schools have, as you mentioned, there are some pro-level players on the Illinois squad that we'll certainly need to be aware of. And you look at Duke trying to build the resume. They're doing what they can. They're playing the schedule that's been put in front of them. They can't really be penalized for the play or the level of play that you're getting out of the ACC. So you look to do other things like that. And here's a good test to kind of give you a March Madness feel at a neutral site venue. Duke has played really well at MSG over the years, and now they get set to take on an Illinois team that's going to give them their best shot, their best effort. I'm looking at the resume stuff, though, and you could see that since the first week of December, when Duke had that Auburn game, and prior to that, they played a team like Louisville, and then they played a team like Kansas and Arizona and Kentucky early in the year. Duke hasn't played a team inside the top 40, according to KenPom, with the exception of Clemson. So this is one of those well-needed tests to make sure you're really where you need to be going into March Madness.
Yeah, and I read a stat the other day that said there's 6 teams that are well above the rest since the turn of the new year, and Duke's number one on that. Or sorry, number 2. Houston was number 1. And you look at that and you think, okay, well, Houston, the Big 12 has not been as good as you thought, but it's still been better because you've got the likes of Iowa State, Arizona, Texas Tech that have overachieved as opposed to that of the underachieving Kansas, whereas that's like Duke's staple win to start the year. Arizona at the time was struggling. It's become a better win. So Duke's resume, while you say, oh, it's super safe, and it certainly is to me, I think there's a perception that Duke can't lose a game, because if they lose a game and they don't win the ACC tournament, they fall off the one line. I don't agree with that, because the SEC has so many teams that are in contention for the one seed that they're going to eat themselves, and Duke kind of keeps themselves irrelevant in that. And they're certainly a contender, but I wonder how similar to Gonzaga in years past, Duke can keep themselves motivated, win these games by so much against inferior opponents. And does it hurt them when they play these close games? I'm sure that's the narrative you hear all the time, that in the close games, you've had Cooper Flagg slip twice and have a turn into the middle. So can Duke win a close game, or will they have to be like UConn and blow everyone out in the two postseason that they've had? So I think that this can maybe dispel some of that narrative, because there's not the pressure of a league game, and you can play a close game against Illinois, and it's not frowned upon because they've played a really difficult schedule. Illinois has, and even though they're inconsistent, I think they're 17-10. They're not exactly a world beater, but they have the talent that it's not looked down upon.
Yeah, the thing with this Duke team, you look at their record, really strong at 23-3 on the season, 15-1 in ACC play so far this year. I hear that narrative, a lot of it, a lot of people talking about, well, we haven't been tested. What's it going to look like when we get into a tournament game? We've had the losses already on the season, 3 so far to Kansas, Kentucky, and Clemson for this Duke basketball team. What does it look like when they are tested once again? But we haven't seen a world like this, where Duke is so clear the best team in the ACC, and then the fall off is drastic. Duke has had dominant years in the ACC. You can go back to 1999 when they didn't lose a single game within the league, but the league wasn't as bad as it currently is right now. So it's a whole lot of uncharted territory is what I would like to say, Leif. All those worries and concerns are so valid, but I don't know how to calm people down or calm myself down in that regard, because we've never seen something like this before in the eyes of Duke. The comparisons to somebody like Gonzaga and what they've gone through, totally fair in the WCC. Duke's just never been in that world.
Yeah, and they shouldn't. The ACC, as of 2019, had 3 1 seeds.
Yeah.
And they had a 4 seed in Virginia Tech that gave Duke all it could handle. They had Florida State, who beat Virginia in the ACC tournament, and Virginia became the eventual national champion. And you had more and more teams that were formidable. The fall-off's been drastic. Now, the other thing to talk about for Duke is, I know we're going to talk about Malik Brown, but my question will be, when Common Maliq gets in foul trouble or fatigued, what is the rotation as you play better teams? Because so far it hasn't mattered, but I think that's something that does matter, because he was the reason that Duke was able to beat Auburn. Like he single-handedly shut down Janai Broom. So when you play the upper echelon teams, I said on your podcast last time that I think Malik Brown's better than Common Maliq. And so if he's better than Common Maliq, how do you replace what he does? And how is it, an alternate scheme? So I think those are the questions that get asked, maybe not against Illinois, but soon.
Need a man to step up. Need Patrick Gamba II to stand up and play well with Malik Brown out. Let's talk a little bit more about that. We'll tell you about some of the names to be aware of on this Illinois team. And Cooper Flagg, man, really good at basketball. We'll continue that part of the conversation in just a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends at Roy. Attention, Duke fans, Locked On Blue Devils fans. The future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happen under the table, and fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athletes that they love. Now with Roy, you get to be part of the change and support Duke athletes in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NIL app, allows you to choose the player you want to support, decide how much to contribute, receive exclusive content from the athletes you back. The best part, if the player transfers, you get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. For a limited time, Roy is matching up to $100 per Duke fan. That's incredible. That means your impact is doubled, helping to keep your favorite players right where they belong, right there in Durham, playing for the Duke Blue Devils. The Roy app is giving fans control, no more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent impact support and help share the team and future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Duke fans and Locked On Blue Devils athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. Roy is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Okay, his name is Leif Thulin. My name is JJ Jackson. We're talking a whole lot of basketball here today, including the impact of Malik Brown, who dislocated his shoulder on Monday with 1 minute and 19 seconds left to go in the first half in the game against Virginia. Now you've got Duke without him for some time, was the phrase that Jon Scheyer put out there, including this game against Illinois. The Blue Devils will not be having him as a player on their roster. That means guys like Kamen Maliq and Patrick Gamba II need to step up and that sort of thing. But to your point, the impact that Malik Brown has on this team is incredible. And my favorite part, you look at the numbers, this is like a 2 points per game, 3 or 4 rebounds per game type player. The deflections are really where he separates himself, such a pest defensively. But when you just simply look at counting stats, you're not going to understand the value of Malik Brown.
Yeah, Malik Brown's the best defender on the team that has 2 lottery-level talents that are known for their defensive acumen. Like Cooper Flagg's an excellent defender, drawn comparisons to Andre Karolinko, Scottie Pippen, you name it. And then you look at the archetype of Maliq, and you look at the previous Duke bigs of Lively and of Mark Williams, and you could say he's even freakier in terms of his length and athleticism, coordination than those guys who have both established themselves as solid NBA bigs in years 1 and 2. So, or I guess 2 and 3 now. So you look at this team, and I think the reason that Malik Brown going out matters a ton if he misses extended time is you have to find a way to work that type of energy and ability back into the game. Like he's always going to play hard, but if he doesn't have his legs under him and in fitness wise, and he can't play as physically with his shoulder bothering him when you get towards the ACC tournament, when you get towards March Madness, those type of things matter. It's actually why I'm worried a little bit about Florida when they lose Alex Condon. Yeah, he's supposed to be back in 2 weeks, but the Duke's playing at all SEC level. I digress, but I think Duke needs to find a little bit of a new identity defensively. When Malik Brown's in, they can blitz because he's so versatile. Now Maliq switches pretty well, especially considering your side, but like now you're set with drop coverage. I think they're easier to figure out defensively than they were because there was Malik Brown versus Maliq, and then you have all the other guys. So I think Duke has lost a curveball and a changeup as opposed to just the fastball you throw with Maliq.
All right, so we're talking about defense and how to, improve without Malik Brown. The defense will be tested against the likes of this Illinois team. That's where they got to stand up first on Saturday inside Madison Square Garden. Simply put, question to you, who are the guys on Illinois that we need to be aware of? I know Morez Johnson is a player that was making an impact defensively for Illinois. He's now broke his wrist. There's an injury on their side of things. But where does Duke need to turn to? Who are they looking out for on Illinois?
Yeah, the head of the snake is clearly Kasparas Yakachonis. He is
that name.
Yeah, he's 6'6" point guard. Think of a collegiate version of Luka Doncic in the sense of he's got the ball in his hands. It's heliocentric. That's the word you always hear around draft circles. The ball's in his hand. The world revolves around him. They set a lot of screens. They pick and roll or pick and pop, and he makes the decisions. His preferred shot is a step back 3, but he's got a ton of guile and know-how. He's played professionally at Barcelona for years before this. He gets to the rim, draws fouls, and he distributes very well. The second player I'd keep an eye out for is Tomislav Ivisic. He's the twin brother of Zvonimir Ivisic, who is at Kentucky, is now at Arkansas, and I think he's the better of the two brothers. He's a very good shooter, and he's 7'1", so he can bang on the inside. So those are the two guys. They're very skill reliant, not particularly athletic, and they have a few athletes that fill in, but they've had a revolving door at the starting line because they like to shoot a ton of threes. That's Illinois' MO. It's shoot a ton of threes, create an advantage, whether it's off of a switch or backing down to the basket, kick out, shoot a three. The slight issue is their team only has a couple three-point shooters, and so they're playing guys that aren't particularly good at shooting threes. And Brad Underwood tried tinkering with the lineup and started playing a guy named Jake Davis, who's a marksman. But the issue is Jake Davis has been shooting very poorly. And then one other thing to note, and I don't know if this has been talked about much, Illinois is really sick. Like the last game they played, they had players leave in the middle of the game to go vomit and didn't return. And so I wonder how healthy this team is, aside from Morez Johnson breaking his wrist, aside from actual injuries.
Sure.
I think there's an illness going around for Illinois as well.
Which is not good anytime that makes an impact on your team. We saw Mason Gillis miss a couple of games with an illness. Cooper Flagg was clearly under the weather in that game against Clemson, as Duke was talking about. So hopefully we can get a good bill of health for both of these squads as they continue to move forward. So looking at this game, though, now we turn it to offense. This is a Duke offense that all season long has been led by Cooper Flagg. Of late, prior to the game against Virginia, where Proctor only had 7 points, over the last 5, he had been averaging about 19 a game and was shooting just astronomical numbers from three-point range. We're coming off a game in which Flagg, Knipple, and Evans each scored 17 for Duke. Isaiah Evans going 5 of 6 from three-point range in that game. Offensively, what should be the game plan if you're Jon Scheyer?
Well, they've been very up and down, Illinois' defense. They at one point were top 10 in KenPom, and now certainly are not. I would try to play no different than the usual of exposing matchups that Duke does. They got a lot of ball screens. They find a way to get Cooper Flagg in an advantageous matchup, and he makes the right play. I believe I said to you guys that Flagg processes everything, and he's unbelievable at making the right play. It's as if he's been coached by Popovich since the age of 9. I think that's the exact quote I've used. So do that again. Like, there's no need to deviate from what's worked. Obviously, if Isaiah Evans and Con Knipple knock down a bunch of threes, then that's the more the merrier. Flagg should probably draw the matchup against a guy named Trey White, who played at Louisville and USC. I'd imagine that's who guards Flagg, and he's bigger, he's faster. Like, I'm not worried about that part. It's just about knocking down shots, because Illinois does have athletes. Morris Johnson going out takes away a rim protector, whereas Avicic is more of a tall presence, but not a particularly good defender. Kylan Boswell is the best defender on Illinois' team, but he's 6'2". So he's going to be a pest, but I don't think he guards Cooper Flagg, and I don't think it bothers the likes of Con Knipple, because he operates pick and roll, but his game's not blowing by you to the rim. He jump stops, kicks out, make the right play, or he knocks down open shots. So I think Illinois is not a team you need to change your game plan for the way to attack them. Duke, they run the same stuff. They create a good action. And if their players knock down threes, then Duke's really, really hard to beat, because they have such a high floor with their defensive capacity. And offensively, they're no slouch, but I think they're still better defensively than offensively.
Yeah, Leif, I know that when the calendar turned from 2024 to 2025, you were talking about the guards for Duke and the impact that they would have on how far this team wants to go and that sort of thing. I mentioned the absolute tear that Tyrese Proctor has been on offensively. Have you seen anything there? It feels in some ways this is the guy that we've been wanting to see all along for Duke.
I mean, he's shooting unbelievably.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing more than that to me in terms of Proctor shooting great. I still don't think he's great at putting the pressure on the rim. Like, that's always been the knock from the NBA perspective, is he doesn't put pressure on the rim and he doesn't finish very well. But if the ball's not in his hands as the primary operator, and now he's knocking down every three he shoots practically, it feels that way, then you've certainly helped yourself out in your draft stock, as well as I think he's the best perimeter defender in the ACC.
Yeah.
Like, he's an excellent perimeter defender. He funnels stuff with his ball pressure to the rim, and it
uses his size well against kind of those smaller guards. Like
and he's going to draw the assignment against Kasparas Jakučionis. I'm pretty darn sure. So I'd imagine it would be him and maybe the likes of Cooper a little bit, but Duke should win this game. I think they'll be a 7-point favorite, something like that. And that's pretty lofty, considering Illinois' KenPom throughout different parts of this season has been actually very high.
Excited to see it play out Saturday night from Madison Square Garden. Going to be a great game between Duke and Illinois. All right, let's take one more quick timeout. When we come back, a few more thoughts on the play of Duke basketball as of late when Locked On Blue Devils returns. Thank you again so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen and your first watch each and every day. Make sure that you go check out the Locked On ACC squad and the Locked On ACC podcast for your second listen. It's Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs that keep it real and bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. Today is a squad day. Locked On ACC squad set to be released a little bit later in your feeds. I was unable to be a part of the show this week, but looking forward in the weeks to come to join the guys once again. So go ahead and find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. Make sure you check that out after this one. All right, we'll start to wrap up our conversation here today with Leif Thulin, who's joining us on the show. And Cooper Flagg, man, the hype just continues to build. So many people are excited about the type of player he is. There's profiles galore that are being written about this guy right now. All these news outlets are trying to aggregate quotes about him saying he wants to come back in a story with The Athletic and taking it totally out of context, as this guy's definitely destined for the NBA next season. But what have you thought about all the hype surrounding this guy this year?
Oh, he's unbelievable. I mean, I actually did a show for the Jazz yesterday, and my headline was Cooper Flagg, how great can he be? Because if the Jazz get him, then like, what are the heights that are attainable? And, there's a lot of stuff. You think about the way he was perceived coming into the season. It was essentially he's really talented, he works hard, but he's not like a natural scorer. Well, he's scoring 20 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and he's shooting 80+% from the line, 36+% from three. Like, where is the deficiency? Oh, he's not a natural jump shooter. Like 36+% from three, and he's shooting some of them off the dribble, and he's hit big shots. And defensively, I think he could be even more than he is because he's shouldering such an enormous load. And he's 18 years old. Like there's conditioning and strength that comes from furthering that. I would make the argument he's the best American-born prospect since Anthony Davis. And I might say, and I probably wouldn't have said he was better in terms of when they came out of college, but knowing what we know about Anthony Davis, he's a 4-time first-team All-NBA, multiple-time first-team All-Defender. He's won a championship, but he's never been the best player on a team that has won more than 2 playoff series. Like LeBron James was the best player on that championship team. I believe Cooper Flagg can be, and perhaps can have more than 4 first-team All-NBA. So maybe he's the best prospect since even before Anthony Davis. And I did a recent one for the Jazz just about the draft because that matters. And for the last 5 number 1 picks, and the one that hasn't been an all-star was Reshaping. And, the verdict's still out, but I was lower on him. But I digress. 4 of the last 5 have been all-stars already. And 63% of number 1 picks the last 30 years have been all-stars. So if you're better than all those guys who are all-stars or all-NBA caliber, and the last 5 years have produced some really good talents, then that's really impressive. The one exception being Victor Wembanyama, which is why I said American-born.
Yeah, no, you're walking in really high regard when you have that number 1 pick hype around you and you deliver the way that Cooper Flagg has. And excited to see him at the next level. Duke continuing to put these stars in. Paulo, a recent number 1 pick. Zion before him. Kyrie several years ago. Jason Tatum, not a top pick, but certainly one of the top faces within the league and a guy that carries the Duke Brotherhood strong for him. I do want to talk about the draft, though, quickly, because I saw this recently on The Athletic. Want people to go and kind of check out the work that's written over there. But the Jazz are one of the teams sort of at the bottom of the NBA that could fit in. And people are having the conversations about, well, where is Cooper Flagg's best fit when you get to the next level? So when you look at the Wizards, the Pelicans, the Jazz, the Hornets, and then the Raptors, where can we pencil this guy in? What kind of works best for him? Or
undeniably my Utah Jazz.
Yeah. Well, I wanted you to say undeniably my Charlotte Hornets. So.
Oh, I'm sorry to disappoint you.
Yeah, but the Jazz. Okay, go ahead.
No, the Jazz. I think he fits in anywhere because you don't need to fit in. You need to stand out when you're the star, and I think he can really elevate a franchise. And the way I evaluate prospects when I'm on NBA Big Board, and so far it's been a pretty successful model, is when you're drafting within the top 3 or 4, I look for potential to change a franchise and not fit in. So that's why Jabari Smith was regarded as the best prospect that year. And I honestly liked watching him more than I liked watching Paolo in college, but I never saw him as more than a Rashard Lewis with a little bit of better defense type. As opposed to Paolo Banchero reminded me a lot of Jason Tatum. They're different, but just for comparison's sake, the guy that can take over a game. As for Cooper Flagg, sure, he may not be as gifted of a scorer as Ace Bailey, but he's so much better at so many different parts. And need I remind you, he's on the number 3 team in the country, or whatever Duke's ranked right now, 4.
3,
whatever he's a top 5 team in the country, and he's scoring more points per game than Ace Bailey is. So I don't care if he's the more gifted scorer. I think Cooper Flagg can go to any franchise, and I'll just use my Jazz as an example, be the best player, and you support him with players like Lauri Markkanen, who re-signed and was on board with the rebuild, and you have someone to space the floor around him, a rim protector in Walker Kessler, and then you have up-and-coming guards like Isaiah Collier, who's really come on and has been sensational recently, then you really have a well-built core. And you're a long way away. But anyone drafting 1 through 5, unless there's something crazy that happens in the lottery and either the Spurs or the Thunder somehow sneak their way in there, then you're a long way away. Like, there's a reason you're drafting where you're drafting. So one more thing about Cooper Flagg, and I don't know if your Duke fans have actually heard this. I found this in an interview yesterday. Brian Scalabrine talks about how he first met Cooper Flagg, and everyone's probably seen this where he says he was 13, he dunked it, and like everyone, like, he's for real. I called up USA, like all that. Yeah. I found a follow-up to that interview yesterday, and he's talked about how Cooper Flagg, what makes good players really good and really good players great in the NBA is how smart they are and how quickly they process things. Like, so he's talking about Kobe, he's talking about LeBron, and he says Cooper Flagg is the type of guy who can watch something and then try to work on it for a couple minutes, practice, and then implements it the next day, as opposed to many people looking at the defenses, reading the concepts. It takes them a couple months to implement and become comfortable enough to do it in games. Sure. He does it in a day and perfects it. So he compared him to a supercomputer, the way he processes things. So I believe his upside is untapped because I don't think he was this polished prospect as of even a year ago. It was just like tenacious, want to. And now he's a guy who's scoring 20 on efficient scoring, making the right play every time. And he's learning the game as well as refining a lot of the skill-based parts. And, you know, like everyone talked about, he was only 17 to start the year. Like, that does matter in terms of the maturation process, less so about skill and less so about efficiency, but maturation in terms of the body. I think Cooper Flagg's a better prospect than I realized coming into this year. And everyone already was talking about Cooper Flagg as, oh my gosh, how great can he be? So he's overachieved in my opinion.
First ACC player with 500 points, 100 assists, and 30 blocks in the regular season in the last 25 years for Cooper Flagg. Pretty impressive numbers. Leif, always good to see you, man, on the show. Always appreciate your thoughts, insights, and all those things. We mentioned the big board. We've mentioned game night before. Kind of tell people all about the work that you can do and how they can support you.
Yeah, I'll be on Locked On College Basketball Game Night each Saturday night. I'll try to talk about the best games of the weekend and try to bring in some hosts. So far, it hasn't worked, and so we'll have Duke Talk on there for sure as one of the preeminent programs. And then if you guys want to talk to me about college basketball, this time of year from February to April, I'm always tweeting stuff about college basketball. So give me a follow at Leif Thulin. It's just my name right there and on the screen. And yeah, I'll engage with you guys about anything college basketball or NBA draft related. And I appreciate the platform to hop on and talk about some college hoops with you.
Yeah, good to see you, Leif. We'll do it again soon, okay?
Absolutely.
All right, that's Leif Thulin joining us here on today's show. Go support his work. That guy just knows basketball. You could tell it when you listen to him, and I really enjoy the conversations that we have. All right, that'll do it for our show here today. Super excited once again for this game that Duke has coming up on Saturday against Illinois, and the hype around Cooper Flagg. It's certainly well-deserved. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you soon. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you, and good day.